And welcome, space weather enthusiasts, to another edition of the Daily Space Weather. And, we show different wavelengths because we're fixated on certain features at certain times. And what we want is a holistic approach here, as we're interested in advancing cosmology through the process of advancing heliophysics, since our understanding of what's going on in distant galaxies is dictated by what's going on that star right there. We'll be talking about it. We'll be talking about all the various features of the closest star, including some incredibly slow solar wind, and the sunspot situation, coronal holes, the outlook for geomagnetic storms and unrest, and more here at the Smash News Network. Least busted name in news. This is ionized iron. This is me learning to speak English. This is ionized iron plus helium. And these wavelengths are really good at showing active regions, also filaments, and some magnetic orientation of plasma to those magnetic field lines. Here we've switched out the 171 angstroms for 193 angstroms, which shows some extended corona, as well as some additional definition on coronal holes and solar filaments. So since we've got some major solar filaments, quite a collection of them on the Earth-facing portion of the solar disk. In fact, let's take a look at some of those. There's one in the southeast. It's a little bit larger than planet Earth. By the way, the most active region is that sunspot in your upper right of your screen. Huge filament down there in your lower left at the southeastern limb. Here is the equatorial zoom, and you can see a lot of material there hanging out, defying gravity, increasing the probability of coronal mass ejections. They're coming, and we think there's one on the way for a glancing blow. See yesterday's video for analysis of that. Here's the North Polar Crown region. Two huge filaments up there on both sides of the Earth scale image. Also a crown prominence here, sort of letting loose and turning into another one of those solar polar vortices. Plenty of action despite a slow solar wind at the moment. We'll get to it. It's extremely slow. And you would probably already know about it if you followed us on Twitter and looked recently. Anyway, we've got an active region there setting in the northwest as well. That produced some flaring activity in the past 24 hours. We'll show you close-ups of that in our favorite flare wavelengths a little bit later in the video. And feast your eyes on this gigantic plasma filament in the northeastern limb. That one's a little bit larger than the Earth, I'd say. And let us a comment. Let us leave us a comment and let us know if you think that one will become a coronal mass ejection. Will it eject? Will it collapse? Will it even, sometimes they even reorient and end up in a different spot. That's probably the most rare situation. Plasma filaments, exciting stuff. Here at the Smash News Network, least busted name in news, and let's take a look at sunspots and magnetic fields. So this is yesterday plus today, and let's do a quick analysis here. Most of those sunspot groups quite stable there. Basically, all of those sunspot groups quite stable. I think there is one group that'll get a name today. That's this small sunspot here in the southeast. There is another active region rising down here just behind this new sunspot group, right about where my pointer is. That might be another sunspot we may know by the end of the video. So make sure you stay tuned for that. We'll be showing high-res imagery to see if there are any umbrae. Now let's take a look at our affiliate. By the way, if you want to support the channel, one of the ways you can do so is via our Amazon shop. And these affiliate links are not designed just to fund the channel's existence, but also to help out people like you, the viewer. So that is part of the reasoning as well here. And today's featured product is the coffee that I'm currently drinking. It's Cameron's medium to dark roast whole bean organic Scandinavian blend. It might look like it's expensive for $23.38. Keep in mind that is for a 4-pound bag. It's what I'm currently drinking. Amazon.com/shop/SmashOmash is where you can find that. If you want to support the channel via subscription services and you want extra content, information like, the mechanism that underlies the solar sunspot cycles, become a gold member at the Smash Team, SmashOmash.com/SmashTeam. These videos are brought to you in part by our Gold and Silver Smash Team members. Thanks to them especially, and for all of you folks who aren't members of the Gold or Silver Smash Team, you should be thanking them as well, as they have increased the likelihood these videos will continue to exist, remain publicly visible, and free for all to view. You can also find our Hemp Lucid affiliate shop linked right below this video, also on the homepage at SmashOmash.com. So if you're shopping for Hemp Lucid products, things like mushroom gummies, which I especially like the Focus mushroom gummies, they contain cordyceps mushrooms, which are known to increase athletic performance, or at least believed to increase athletic performance. We're not making any claims that any of the products cure, diagnose, or treat any sort of diseases or anything like that. However, try them out. Let us know what you think in the comments. Enter the promo code SmashOmash on your Hemp Lucid order to save 10%. The promo code SmashOmash will save you 10% on your Hemp Lucid order. Shop via our link or use the promo code. Thanks to everybody who has. And let's get back to Croissant Earth, as there are some volcanoes erupting, like Mount Abiko there on Paramushir Island, located in between Kamchatka and Japan. It's been producing an explosive eruption, black lapilli, and bombs. So ash and gas and so on, dust coming out of Abiko. No indication on the size of the ash plume. Please do not fly your ultralight aircraft or home-built kit helicopter over the caldera. Suwanosejima exploding as well, flight level 060 over the Ryukyu Islands. Krakatau producing about a 10,000-foot ash plume there as it explodes once again. The daughter of Krakatoa there, once again at it with strong eruptive activity for the past 2 days. Semeru also exploding, flight level 130, that's a 13,000-foot ash plume over East Java, Indonesia. Kilauea's alert has been reduced from warning to watch. So if you wanted to be frightened of what's going on the Hawaiian Islands, sorry, it's gotten less scary there. Terribly sorry about that. Popocatépetl issued the following report, and there's absolutely nothing there. The Volcanic Ash Advisory Center, Washington, issued the following report. Nothing. Okay. Fuego in Guatemala exploding, flight level 150. That's a 15,000-foot ash plume. 14,000-foot ash plume over Ecuador from Revenador. New emissions reported from Cotopaxi and Sabancaya in Peru, producing a 23,000-foot ash plume as it explodes. It's a flight level 230. We'll also look at global seismicity. Here's what's been going on for the past 90 days. And over the past 24 hours, the largest quake occurred in the Bering Sea. So just north of those tiny Aleutian volcanic islands there, the Rat Islands. That was a 5.7 magnitude. It came through at 20:31 yesterday evening, Universal Time, just after 8:30 p.m. Anyway, these are the rest of the quakes that are of a 5 or larger magnitude. Not very many. It's been quite seismically calm here. Just keep in mind that any earthquake can be a foreshock. And by the way, we're planning on producing a video this weekend with Mr. Eugene Bagashov, where we will actually talk about earthquake forecasting. Yeah, earthquake forecasting. It's a thing that's constantly talked about on YouTube, as channels claim to be able to forecast earthquakes. We just don't see any actual evidence of that. And thanks for leaving comments, Mr. Bordages. Time to get back to space. And here's 171 angstroms from the SDO for the past 24 hours. And let's talk about the radio flux. 10.7 centimeter radio flux has come up a little bit since yesterday. It's now at 169 solar flux units. So there's the 1-year graph of the radial flux and the sunspot number. The radial flux is the black line. Sunspot number is the red line. The two most definitive features of what we'd call a solar cycle. Space weather enthusiast dashboard here, not forecasting any geomagnetic storms or geomagnetic unrest, which differs from our forecast. Again, watch yesterday's daily space weather video, as we're expecting both a CME impact and, let's don't forget, the coronal hole high-speed stream. So we're expecting the coronal hole high-speed stream to show up on Sunday. If you want to hear about the coronal hole impact, the coronal mass ejection impact, watch yesterday's video. Pretty easy to find. And thanks to our YouTube viewers for tuning in. Here's the past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from space. This is our Geospace Magnetosphere movie. This depicts magnetohydrodynamic pressure. It's based on a whole host of different variables known as the Space Weather Modeling Framework. And as you may expect with a solar wind below 280 kilometers per second, we've got a very low-pressure plasma environment currently around planet Earth. It's also a geomagnetically calm condition on the ground level. This is Earth's magnetic moment from the ground for the past 4 hours. This depicts nanotesla, which is magnetic flux density. And when we do have geomagnetic storms and so on, this is one of the best data sets to help you discover where the aurora might be visible, to get yourself and your camera outside and get some video or footage of it, or photos. Video or photos. Preferably video. Planetary K-index currently at 1. Again, it is a geomagnetically calm condition. We are expecting some upticks coming in the coming days. It's the calm before the storm, or so we think. So check it out. Solar wind speed here below 280 kilometers per second, currently showing up as 277, 275. One of the slowest solar wind speeds that we've ever reported on the channel. In fact, slower than the solar wind speed usually is at solar minimum. 275 is incredibly slow. And sub 2 protons per cubic centimeter for the solar wind density there at 1.89 protons per cubic centimeter is indeed quite diffuse. But the main story is how slow that solar wind is. And let's take a look at some more data here, like the GOES magnetometers. You can expect to see these get a little bit sawtooth when we see the coronal mass ejection impact and the coronal hole high-speed stream that apparently NOAA isn't forecasting. We're forecasting it. We just don't rely on anybody else for our forecasts. We look at facts, and then we cite those facts for appropriate space weather forecasting, as opposed to utter nonsense, of which you'll find a lot of on YouTube. Now we're looking at the top view, look at the plane field plot, and there is a South Pole current sheet headed this way. You can see that sector boundary crossing there where the green turns to red. That is the sector boundary crossing right there. And all that really is, folks, is the changing of the polarity of the plasma. So here we've got North Pole plasma. Here we've got South Pole plasma. Don't expect any fireworks from that. However, the South Pole current sheet has been the more exciting one. We are still waiting for this coronal hole at the north heliographic pole to exit, so we can say, hey, solar maximum is basically around the corner at any moment. So here's our line of sight plot, and you can see that B field shown in blue. Sector boundary crossing there, approaching in the east as we have South Pole oriented coronal holes rising over the eastern limb. So here's our line of sight coronal hole plot, and there you can see those little red blobs there showing up over the eastern horizon. They are transequatorial, so in about 5 or 6 days we can expect some activity from them. But at the moment, things really, really calm. And let's take a look at coronal holes here from SDO. There is the 211 angstroms wavelength. So what you've got here is North Pole oriented coronal holes. Here's your sector boundary crossing. And over here we've got South Pole transequatorial coronal holes, which, by the way, are the most geo-effective type. So that's your coronal hole and heliospheric current sheet plasma polarity update. Hopefully that's sufficient detail for you regarding that stuff. And now let's take a look at sunspots. So, okay, so 3332 has gotten a name today. 3332 now named. There may be a new active region rising down here just behind 3332. The most active region is, I believe, continuing to be 3327. And let me just bring up the latest here. Let's see. That's number 10. So it still is showing some significant likelihood of producing some large flares there. We'll look at the magnetic complexity. I believe that is still the most magnetically complex sunspot, but we'll show high-res imagery of that at the end of the video just to make sure. Ghost proton flux here remaining flatlined. No solar energetic particle events. And no major flares. Flaring has been dropping for the past few days. There's a 7-day graph. You can see flaring here dropping off for about the past 4 or 5 days. The current background flux is all the way down to a C1.02 or so. So it's about a C level of background flux. And no indication that's going to suddenly increase here as we've got pretty weak sunspot groups. By the way, let's take a look at those sunspot groups. Here we've got your SDO magnetogram plus 131 angstroms. Once again, these sunspots have been mostly stable here since yesterday. No major changes, no major growth or decay. Let's subtract that 131 angstroms for just the magnetogram. And then we'll show the SDO intensity gram as well, or SDO continuum. There we go. There's SDO continuum. So the likelihood of flaring to continue up here is waning. This would be the second most likely place to see a large solar flare. And the third one would be right here. That looks like a magnetically complex sunspot group to me. This one here has got some potential as well. I see a lot of ombre there. They are likely of opposite polarities. And don't worry, again, we'll show you high-res imagery of that a little bit later in the video. Let's show our favorite wavelengths for flares. Again, there's the 3-day solar flaring outlook. And here is a 24-hour video in 94 angstroms. We'll highlight the most active regions, which were the northwestern limb as those active regions set, and this sunspot down here. So here's your zoomed in equatorial view. And you can see that active region rising right back here. It is already producing some flares, so I suspect that that is indeed another sunspot. If you thought the sun was shutting down, well, look at all the sunspots. And please exit your cult. So there is the northwestern limb. Again, that has produced a little bit of flaring in the past 24 hours, so we figured we would highlight it. Again, the likelihood of large flares there is waning as time goes on. This is the most active region for the past 24 hours. And let's talk more space. Are you spaced out enough, folks? Have you achieved significant levels of being spaced out? We hope you're as spaced out as you want to be. And since I'm always interested in what's going on overhead, there's a star chart. We've got a gibbous moon there near Saturn up in the sky, not visible because, well, I think it's not only cloudy here in Lehigh Valley, but it's also light out as the sun is quite a few degrees there off the horizon. And if you are looking at the post-sunset sky, you'll see two of the brighter objects there, the third brightest object and the sometimes fourth brightest object there, which is Mars, the third brightest being Venus, visible in the early nighttime sky. By the way, if you don't follow us on Twitter, you wouldn't have known until seeing this video, perhaps, about the incredibly low solar wind speed. We just tweeted about it before we created this video. If you want to name solar filaments after living people, now would be a good time to do so. Follow the hashtag #NameThatFilament over there on Twitter. You'll also see all kinds of other posts that you may not know about. Did you know we're also on Facebook? Yeah, we're on Facebook as Smash-O-Mash. There's also a group called Entropy Busters, so join that if you're one of those Facebook types. Today's featured product is forgive, remember, and hold accountable. Why? Because accountability always comes one way or another. And typically, when you put off accountability until a shockingly late period in time, you will have a worse result as capitulation occurs and damage doesn't get mitigated. So don't hold a grudge, folks. Holding a grudge is like ingesting poison and expecting the other person to die. So instead, forgive, remember, and hold accountable, because accountability always comes for everybody, one way or another. You can also support the channel via clicks at SmashOmash.com, the official homepage of the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. And welcome to the Neo Renaissance. We launched it back in 2019 as a result of pathetic, ridiculous, nonsensical, and non-fact-based censorship by pathetic criminal organizations commonly referred to as Big Tech. Here's your solar system forecast. We've got it's 6/9, and let's move things ahead 1 week. As where things will be on 6/16, we will have a crescent waning moon by then as we approach the June new moon, my favorite phase. Next, some coronagraphs. And there have been some CMEs here. We'll let you know if we think they're earthly directed in a moment. Again, watch yesterday's video if you want to hear about a CME impact forecast. And getting people to watch videos on YouTube is like rolling dice and throwing your dice in the garbage. Anyway, that's 105 frames from yesterday, some CMEs in there. We will look at those a little more in depth here next. There are today's frames, an additional 29 frames, some more rather minor CME activities and outflows happening there. Nothing too exciting going on. Here is Soho Lasco C2 and C3 together. And it looks like the most interesting CME was earlier this morning. That does not look like it's earthly directed at all. It is off to the southwest. Just to get some additional data here, we'll also show the view from Stereo A. We like to show this image every day because people may not realize that Earth and Stereo B are overtaking each other, as Stereo B is going this way and Stereo A is going this way. And we've got a very bad angle on calculating CME trajectory. It creates a challenge for those of us who are attempting to forecast space weather. It causes us to use more deductive reasoning in addition to the inductive reasoning that is looking at this data. So there's Stereo A on the left and Soho Lasco C3 on the right. I don't believe any of those CMEs are earthly directed. If you think I'm incorrect, let us know in the comments. And by the way, in science, those of us who do real science appreciate being wrong. It should be a learning experience, not an opportunity to attempt to gaslight people and destroy your own credibility. Don't shartlight people, folks. And if you want to know what shartlighting is, hit up the Redbubble Shop, links below the video to the Redbubble Shop. Don't shartlight people. Don't shartlight. It is a complete failure. You will just crap on your own credibility There's some great imagery there from SDO in 193 angstroms, part of the extreme ultraviolet spectrum, as well as SOHO, LASCO C2 and C3. How about even closer? There's some pretty sweet imagery for you. Little more than a spectacular light show. None of that material appears to be headed toward your back door or your front door or your paperboy's house. Here's the past 24 hours and just 193 angstroms by itself, and that CME from the southwest came from right up here. It is on the Earth side of the solar disk. It's just not earthly directed. It is off to the southwest, as you may expect from a CME occurring in that area. Our regular viewers probably certainly expect it. But anyway, let's move right along here, as it's time to look at solar filaments and go, dag, that's a lot of filaments. Dag, that's a lot of filaments. So let's see here. Let's bring up the last image here so it stops moving. That's the last image there of hydrogen alpha from El Teide, Spain. And we've got, let's see, we'll say 1, 2, that's a terrible 2. Let me try that again. 2, 3. This one's 4. That's just a really long filament. 5 down at the South Pole. How about 6 is that one right there. 7, 8. Also this one right over here is 9. And there's 10. So 10 filaments. I mean, you could even make the argument that this one and this one are separate. You could say like a dozen filaments on the Earth-facing side of the solar disk. That is a lot of filaments. And if you'd like to name those after living people, you're invited to join us on Twitter. And if you think censorship is fixed on Twitter because Elon has fixed free speech, you are living in a pathetic and delusional fantasy world. Enter into the real world. Censorship is not fixed at all. It's as pathetic as it was in March of 2020. Here's the past couple of hours from the GOES 16 SUVI. And what's going on here? Some plasma spraying around over here in the northwest. We got some instability happening up here, some instability happening down here. And of course, that new sunspot likely there rising in the southeast. Let's just zoom out briefly here to show the time and date stamps. That's the past 2.5 hours from the GOES 18. Did I say GOES 16? It's the GOES 18 SUVI, 304 angstroms ionized helium, which brings us to bonus features. So bonus features starting out here with satellite charging hazards. It's smooth sailing for satellites, no surface or internal charging hazards. The GOES electron flux here is just in a low range, and we are expecting a dip in this as we forecasted yesterday. See yesterday's daily space weather video for more information on that. And there are those relativistic electrons in the 1-year graph from solon.info. Here's the forecast, and it looks like maybe NOAA is watching our videos, although I think they're off by a day. Oh, no, that is right. We are expecting a decrease in the electron flux coming mid to late day tomorrow. So you may actually see this end up here and then these next two lower because of not only a CME impact, but also a coronal hole high-speed stream showing up. We'll also show the F layer of the ionosphere. Feel free to pause the video on this frame if you're not familiar with these distances in kilometers. Distances, temperatures, penetration of electromagnetic radiation. This is the vibrational frequency of the F layer. That's about 300 kilometers of altitude. In many ways, you could consider it the bridge between Earth and space. So that's what's been going on for the past day, and things are looking pretty normal there. unless I'm missing something. Don't worry, we'll show you the anomalygram just to make sure. So at the moment here, you're seeing mostly low-frequency anomalies south of the equator, where winter is approaching. You're seeing most of the high-frequency anomalies there north of the equator, where summer's approaching. No real surprises there. No super strange oddities happening in the ionosphere. And the signals that you are seeing there are more likely to be Earth-based signals than space-based signals because, well, the solar wind is so diffuse and so slow that this is a really good time to get a clear signal for these sorts of things. Anyway, the current conditions are there is 11:15 universal time ionogram and 11:30 universal time anomalygram. There's 11:15 on both. We'll also show total electron content, which will show you the most likely places to see a GPS error. Your GPS could be off by thousands of miles if it has to communicate through a lot of free electrons. It's located about 12,500 miles of altitude, the inner portion of the outer Van Allen belt. And here is the electron content. We are seeing some anomalies here, especially in the southern hemisphere. Some of those electrons quite out of place. And that is a thing more typical of low electron flux than high electron flux. Keep in mind the electron flux is only one slice. It's measured at the F layer of the ionosphere. This is all of the electrons, all the way from ground level through the ionosphere, the inner plasmasphere, the inner Van Allen belt, the outer plasmasphere, and the inner portion of the outer Van Allen belt. Those are your most likely places to see GPS errors. Here's the North American total electron content anomaly from the 10-day average, and we are seeing some signals here over North America. So some high electron content anomalies there over places like Canada, actually. So there you go. And keep in mind, folks, most of the electrons, at least in the inner Van Allen belt, are originated from Earth. They come from Earth. They are not space electrons, most of them. I'm not sure how Eugene came up with this. Maybe we'll talk about it in this weekend's video. We're going to be doing an extended video about all kinds of nonsensical theories that people state on the internet, and it's going to be exciting stuff. So make sure you check that out. Eugene the Philosopher and I are expecting to take a bit of a deep dive into nonsense as well as facts, as Eugene is releasing a paper, and we're going to have a little shindig about that. So here is the latest intensitygram and latest SDO magnetogram. Let's take a look at this new sunspot that's rising here. And I do not see an umbra yet, so it's not a sunspot yet. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's probably a sunspot. So anyway, things here quite stable. This sunspot, in terms of its magnetic shear, not really that complex. I mean, you do have some deltas. There's a delta right there, and you could make the argument that this is some deltas right here. But yeah, that's looking a little weaker here. A little bit of deltas there on that group. This group down here, not looking particularly complex. This group up here, a little bit promising. So yeah, there is significant likelihood of solar flares there. Again, the most likely sunspot group for flares, I would say actually they're both right in the Earth zone here. So both of these groups are my favorites for producing large flares at the moment. Anyway, what that means is that it is now time to go to meteorology. And the story will certainly be smoke. So let's talk about it. Here we're looking at particulate matter. That's particulate matter that is of 10 micrometers or smaller. And there is a huge plume of smoke moving through Pennsylvania at the moment. So that's it's been moving from West PA into Central PA, and it's going to be in the eastern part of PA here later today. Expecting a big uptick in the smoke in Lehigh Valley. So yeah, it's coming back. And those weather systems just continue to persist and stagnate. So, I mean, if you look at the jet stream here, there's this low pressure just hanging out here around the Canadian-New England border. And that is largely what is causing that. There's also some constrainment caused by dry mass of air. And let's move to our regular meteorological analysis here. There is your jet stream scenario for the eastern world. Here is your surface wind scenario for the east. Again, two powerful tropical cyclones here, one west of India and one east of the Philippines. That looks like it has intensified a little bit since yesterday. Here are the surface winds of the west. And these are the jet streams, which are, by the way, going to get a little bit more coherent over the U.S., still quite incoherent. You can see the jet stream blowing in a very odd direction up here by the Pacific Northwest, pulling warm air into places like Washington and Oregon. Down here you can see cold air being pulled down across the Great Lakes, accelerating the winds, which is a feature of water, by the way. And then a huge convergence of the jet stream here in the Atlantic, just off the coast of, I'll say, North Carolina. Here are the jet streams of the central world. And these are the surface winds. So here's our windy.com map, and now we're looking at just aerosol, and you can see all that aerosol pollution there moving across Pennsylvania. It's about to be here, and you can see the wind is just going like this, and then making a turn to the southeast, and then making a turn to the northeast. So, and that's caused by a blocking feature. There's some dry mass of air down here, and that's constraining this low pressure. So that's the situation. And it's going to continue here. Speaking of continuing, let's do the same. Pardon the delay. Just need to regain control of my own browser, folks. No big deal. All right, so here is clouds and fog. As we show daily on the channel, that's clouds and fog over the Americas. As the croissant-shaped Earth is projected onto a fake Adobe Photoshop NASA spherical template to trick people into thinking the Earth is a sphere. Our regular viewers are well aware that planet Earth is shaped like a croissant, so stop believing NASA's lies and click the links below the video to the Red Bubble Shop. Forgive, remember, hold accountable, and join the Croissant Earth Society. Here's our weather.gov map. Weather.gov is the location. If you've got weather alerts, we've got some flooding forecasted in the northwestern portion of the U.S., and we've got some bad air quality forecasted in the mid-Atlantic states. Also some high winds around Hawaii. Again, if your location is lit, click your location on weather.gov. Here are some forecasts for the lower 48. So that's pressure and precipitation there for the next 72 hours based on a GFS model. And we show GFS 72-hour forecasts because they have a tendency to be accurate. We don't show 3-week forecasts because I have a tendency to not be an idiot. Here is your total accumulated precipitation forecast based on that same GFS 72-hour model. And you can see some heavy rains there forecasted, especially for the southeastern corner of Montana, expecting over 4 inches of rain there. So, I mean, it's not going to be as bad as Cuba, which is getting places with 2 feet of rain, which is, of course, because of HARP geoengineering, chemtrails, and ScopeX. So that's, pardon my sarcasm. Here is your temperature anomaly forecast. That is in degrees Celsius. It is based on the same model, the GFS 72-hour temperature anomaly forecast in degrees Celsius. It will remain slightly unseasonably cold for most of the portion of the country that's east of the Mississippi there is going to remain largely below average. We've got some higher temperatures here coming to Pennsylvania and New Jersey, however. And like we said, the jet stream there is continuing to drive warm air into the Pacific Northwest. And thanks for leaving a comment, John. Yes, Mike, there's a Eugene video coming this weekend. This is going to be the reason for all of the weather oddities to continue, although it's going to start to build a more normal jet stream over the U.S. here. So right at the end of this 3-day period, we're going to see a more normal jet stream forming right there. You can see it starting to push its way into the hot air-ridden state of Colorado there at the end of the next 3 days. That's your 72-hour GFS 250 millibar wind speed forecast. So there is the jet stream depicted for you. That is what's causing the funky weather. It looks like a low is about to form here over Lake Superior. But it's a pretty weak one. Anyway, here is your lightning mapper. And Montana and the Dakotas had quite a bit of lightning there in the past 10.5 hours. And here's your real-time lightning map from lightningmaps.org, powered by blitzortung.org. Lots of European lightning here, and a bit of lightning in the Atlantic as well as the north-central U.S. Looks like we have some thunder showers happening here. Is there thunder rolling in for anybody? Indeed there is. Hey, Macintosh. That's Macintosh, South Dakota. Some thunder rolling in there. Some minor thunder showers there in the Dakotas. They don't look too extreme. It looks like the strongest one is just south of Sioux Falls. Hey, Yankton. Don't have your chain yanked by nonsense purveyors on YouTube who keep telling you that the world's going to end, civilization's going to end, and then it doesn't end, and then your plans are ruined, and then they just pivot to some other nonsense and act like they were right the whole time. It's pretty pathetic. Here is our smoke map, and yeah, check it out. It's pretty smoky. Pretty smoky indeed. Let's click to refresh data layers. So there you go. And like we said, the smoke is expected to continue. By the way, press like, subscribe, and share if you enjoy the content. Tell your friends and foes about the channel, as YouTube demonetizes videos for us nearly every day for absolutely no valid reason. We've recently increased our views to like 3,000 or 4,000 a day. So thanks to everybody who has tuned into the channel. Thanks to all you new viewers and subscribers. Congratulations on realizing the channel exists. We're frankly surprised. Check out our playlists for content that may not be apparent on the channel. We do a lot more than space weather. You can also follow us on Instagram, and links below the video and on the homepage to our social media following. We're all over the internet at Smash-O-Mash. We're going to close out our Space and Earth Weather Together video with U.S. Doppler radar for the lower 48. Clouds and fog, depicted by the 3.9 micrometer radiation map, part of the NASA GOES Interactive Weather Satellite Suite. And here's the water vapor map, and this is what I wanted to highlight here. You've got this relative high pressure, this dry mass of air down here, and it's acting as a blocking feature. So the low is now right about here. It's just been loitering. You can see that counterclockwise rotation happening, and that air is being corralled by this dry mass of air. This high down here is keeping all of this air together, and that is what is compressing smoke into the mid-Atlantic states. Anyway, hopefully that helps. Hopefully you understand basic physics, astrophysics, and atmospheric physics. That will help these videos to seem like they make more sense. And basically the purpose of these videos, we think the prerequisite is appropriate to have a high school physics level of education to understand the content. There's U.S. Doppler radar. Here is clouds and fog once again. And last but not least, water vapor. When your Doppler is not making sense, here at the Smash News Network, least busted name of news, we think the water vapor map is the one to pick, and I think the bunker is the place to go. So yeah, pardon the sarcasm, I'm headed back to the bunker, and good luck with all of that scary, scary stuff happening overhead. It's very scary, folks. Pardon the sarcasm. We'll see you soon. I'm headed back to the bunker. What?